They called it the Spare, the scout car. That was the mistake. On the frigid morning of December 18, 1944, near the Belgian village of Stavelot, a column of German half-tracks crept through the pre-dawn darkness. In the lead SDKFZ 251, Oberfeld Wobbelklausmeer scanned the road ahead from the open top, alert to every shadow. His crew had been on the move since midnight, spearheading deep into American lines in what would soon be remembered as the opening phase of the Battle of the Bulge. The half-tracks were Hanomag-built, reliable, proven machines that had carried German infantry across Russia, North Africa, and France since 1940. 8 mm of armor on the front stopped rifle fire and shell fragments. Open-topped, yes, but it allowed crews to dismount quickly and maintain visibility. Maya trusted his half-track. It had brought him through 3 years of war. Then he saw it. A low, angular silhouette blocked the intersection ahead. 6 wheels, not tracks. A turret with a small gun. An American M8 Greyhound armored car. Lightly armed, fast, but fragile, the kind of vehicle intelligence said would flee under real fire. Meare's gunner already had the MG-42 trained. The commander calculated quickly, the armored car was alone. Behind them, the column had 2 half-tracks and a Panzer IV somewhere in the convoy. Any sensible American crew would reverse and vanish before the Germans closed in. But the Greyhound did not move. Its turret turned slowly, the barrel locking on the lead half-track. Then came the flash. A sharp crack. The 37 mm armor-piercing round struck the SDKFZ 251's front plate. 8 mm of armor meant nothing. The shell tore through the crew compartment, striking the radio equipment and sending shrapnel flying. Meare never knew what killed him. The vehicle coasted to a stop, engine still running, blocking the road. The second half-track tried to maneuver around the wreck. Another shot, another deadly penetration. Within minutes, 2 half-tracks were disabled, 11 men dead or wounded. The Greyhound, its mission complete, reversed smoothly and disappeared down a side road. 4 rounds had decided the battle. German troops had been told these scout cars were observation vehicles, meant to avoid combat. No one mentioned they could kill a half-track. The SDKFZ 251 was no accident, it was a carefully engineered battle taxi, combining speed, protection from rifle fire, and open tops for rapid infantry deployment. But against a 37 mm gun at close range, its armor was paper-thin. By December 1944, thousands of M8 Greyhounds were operating across Western Europe. Their crews knew their vehicles' strengths and limitations. German half-track crews did not. They still believed American armored cars were harmless scouts. Warning at Stavelot would teach them otherwise. Staff Sergeant Robert Harper, 24, from Michigan, commanded Troop B, 87th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron. A former mechanic trained in Fort Riley, he knew the 37 mm gun could penetrate half-track armor. Harper's gunner, Corporal James Mitchell, laid in rounds, ready to fire. At approximately 200 meters, the first shot hit the lead half-track, stopping it instantly. The second round struck the next vehicle, passing straight through, leaving death and chaos in its wake. The third half-track reversed frantically. Commander Unrazier Hans Way watched in disbelief. American scout cars were supposed to flee, not fight. Yet here they were, precise, lethal, and utterly effective. German survivors would spend the rest of the morning trying to understand what had happened. American crews confirmed their weapons worked as designed. The psychological difference was stark, one side stunned and terrified, the other validated and confident. Engagements like Stavelot spread quickly. Across Belgium, M8 Greyhounds would repeatedly stop German half-tracks, light armored vehicles proving devastatingly effective in the hands of well-trained crews. On that December morning, 14 German soldiers were killed, and 9 more wounded. Each engagement followed a strikingly similar pattern. German half-tracks approached an American position, and American armored cars, positioned behind cover at distances of 200 to 500 meters, engaged them. The 37 mm guns of the M8 Greyhounds pierced the half-track armor effortlessly. Unable to retaliate effectively with their machine guns and unwilling to close to point-blank range for infantry engagement, the half-tracks withdrew and called for heavier support. By the time German tanks or assault guns arrived, the American armored cars had already shifted to new positions. Within 3 days of the German offensive start, commanders across the attacking formations understood the serious threat posed by American reconnaissance vehicles. Orders were issued at battalion and regiment levels. Half-tracks were not to engage American armored cars without tank support. Reconnaissance patrols encountering M8s were to report the contact and withdraw rather than attempt a fight. This marked a fundamental shift in German tactical doctrine. Previously, half-tracks were aggressive reconnaissance and infantry transport vehicles, expected to probe enemy positions and push forward rapidly. Now, commanders instructed them to avoid contact with one of the most common American vehicles. With thousands of M8 Greyhounds deployed across the Western Front, the tactical implications were enormous. German reconnaissance became cautious and hesitant. Half-track patrols that once aggressively sought enemy positions now hesitated at the mere suspicion of American armored cars, slowing the German tempo and giving American forces more time to detect and respond to enemy movements. German commanders quickly grasped the problem. Oberstleutnant Benurayen Piper, commanding Kampfgruppe, noted in his combat journal that American armored cars were unexpectedly lethal to reconnaissance elements. Some units attempted to mitigate this by leading half-track patrols with a tank or assault gun, providing sufficient firepower to neutralize M8s. A Panzer IV's 75mm gun or a Stu G3's 75mm could destroy an M8 at any combat range. Yet this solution brought new problems. Tanks were slower than half-tracks, reducing reconnaissance speed, consuming far more fuel, and diverting essential resources from the main offensive. Some German units tried using heavier armored cars, like the rare SDKFZ 232 8-wheeler with 20mm guns, for reconnaissance instead of half-tracks. But these vehicles were limited in number, leaving most reconnaissance units dependent on half-tracks for mobility and infantry transport. The psychological impact on German infantry was subtle but real. Panzer grenadiers had trusted half-tracks to shield them from small arms fired during approaches to combat. Now they knew American reconnaissance vehicles could easily penetrate their armor. The sense of security these vehicles had provided evaporated. While still better than walking or riding in unarmored trucks, half-tracks were no longer the secure mobile fortresses they had seemed. Meanwhile, American reconnaissance units gained confidence. The phrase spread among cavalry squadrons and reconnaissance battalions, "Your 37mm gun can kill half-tracks." Success bred confidence. Commanders became more willing to order their armored cars to engage when tactically appropriate. Training doctrine in the US was updated to reflect combat experience. Crews arriving in Europe were explicitly taught that their 37mm guns were effective against German half-tracks, armored cars, and other light vehicles. Gunnery exercises included realistic engagement of half-track-sized targets at varying ranges. The message was clear: American crews were not helpless when encountering light German armor. Industrial and design lessons were equally clear. The M8 Greyhound had been intended primarily as a reconnaissance vehicle, with its gun meant for self-defense against enemy scouts. Combat experience proved the design sound. Its 37mm gun, though obsolete against medium and heavy tanks, was entirely sufficient against light armor. Its speed allowed crews to choose when and where to fight, and its armor protected against small arms and shell fragments while maintaining mobility. German planners reviewing the reports realized their critical miscalculation. Half-track armor was designed in the late 1930s to resist rifles, machine guns, and artillery fragments, not light anti-tank weapons or 37 to 45mm guns. By the time this vulnerability became evident in combat, it was too late to redesign the vehicle. Germany's industrial capacity was fully committed to existing production, and halting it to redesign half-tracks would have disrupted supply for months. The story of the M8 Greyhound and the SDKFZ 251 half-track is preserved through combat reports, unit histories, and post-war interviews. American cavalry units documented engagements matter-of-factly, noting targets and rounds fired. German units reported losses and requested guidance for dealing with the new threat. Military historians compiled these accounts, analyzing reconnaissance operations during the war. Post-war studies by the U.S. Army Armor School at Fort Knox concluded that the M8 had been highly effective in its design role. It provided excellent reconnaissance capability, sufficient firepower to engage enemy light armor, and reliability to operate far from supply lines. While the 37mm gun was obsolete against medium and heavy tanks, it was fully effective against half-tracks, reconnaissance vehicles, and light fortifications. These lessons influenced post-war armored car design. The M38 Wolfhound, which replaced the Greyhound in the 1950s, retained many of its features but incorporated a larger 76mm gun and improved armor. German historians drew different conclusions. The half-track was effective for its intended purpose, but that purpose had been defined in the late 1930s. By 1944, battlefield realities had changed, leaving half-tracks vulnerable. Resource constraints prevented the production of improved designs in significant numbers. When the Federal Republic of Germany rebuilt its military in the 1950s, it abandoned half-tracks entirely in favor of fully tracked armored personnel carriers like the M113, offering thicker aluminum armor and enclosed crew compartments, directly reflecting lessons from World War II. For veterans, memories of the December 18, 1944, engagements remained vivid. Baer, the German half-track commander who survived Stavelot, immigrated to Canada after the war and rarely spoke of his experiences. In a 1982 interview, he described that day as when he realized Germany would lose, not because of two destroyed half-tracks, but because of what they represented: American forces equipped in quantity with reliable vehicles, well-trained crews, and ample resources. Harper, the American M8 commander, returned to Michigan and ran a service station in Detroit for 35 years. His Bronze Star hung on the wall, but he rarely discussed it. In a 1976 interview commemorating the Battle of the Bulge, he stated simply, "We had a good vehicle, good training, and good equipment. We did our job. That's all there was to it." Mitchell, Harper's gunner, became a high school history teacher in Ohio, recounting his wartime experience clinically, focusing on training, equipment, and execution. The contrast between German and American veterans was stark. German soldiers remembered shock, disbelief, and inadequacy. American soldiers recalled validation, confidence, and mission accomplishment. The broader significance lies not in the immediate tactical impact but in what it revealed about industrial warfare. Victory depends on production capacity, logistics, training infrastructure, and the ability to equip entire armies effectively. The M8 Greyhound killing German half-tracks was a microcosm of this truth. The men who fought understood it intuitively. Soldiers fight differently when they trust their equipment versus when they know it is inadequate. The Stavelot engagement showed that courage and professionalism could not compensate for fundamental material inferiority. The gap between perception and reality defined much of the late-war German experience. Weapons adequate in 1939 were revealed inadequate in 1944. Tactics that had worked against weaker opponents failed against the industrial might of the United States. Today, the M8 Greyhound and the SDKFZ 251 half-track survive in museums and private collections. Visitors can see the 37mm gun that proved deadly and the 8mm armor that proved insufficient. The mathematics of their encounters remain unchanged. Physics does not consider courage, doctrine, or nationality. A 37mm round at sufficient velocity will penetrate 8mm armor. That was true in December 1944, and it remains true today.